Vectors are a resizable array of elements allocated on the heap. Vectors are an essential type in Rust because they are used almost anywhere one needs a list of dynamic size. The easiest way is to use the vec macro, and as a reminder, we will talk more about macros later on in this course. But for now, let's just look at how to create a vector using the vec macro. So I went ahead and created a new variable called nums, and we are going to use the vec macro to create a vector. So I'm going to put in the values 1, 2, and 3, and now remember, I said that vectors are resizable. So let's add a value into this vector already and call it and give it the value 4. So now let's print this out and see how it works. Nums. Now this is going to produce an error, but I want you to see the error so that we can understand why it's an error. So it says vec of type integer cannot be formatted with the default formatter. So if we continue reading down, and this is just showing you how helpful the Rust compiler is, it will say you may be able to use a colon and a question mark instead. So basically what that is that's going to allow us to put it into debug mode. That's what the question mark is, and the colon basically says take the next thing and then push it into the formatter and output it into debug mode. So now that we have that in there and we cargo build, don't forget to make your variable mutable since we are changing it by adding in another number. And now we can see we have the values 1, 2, 3, and 4 printed out. But we can also remove values. So we can use the pop method that a vector provides us. And what pop is going to do is it's going to take the last value that we pushed into the vector and remove it. So let's pop 1 and then let's print it out, and it should remove the 4 from the vector, which is exactly what it did, which is awesome. So there is another way that we can create vectors, so let's go ahead and do that, and it's called vec new. So when we use the vec macro, this is essentially what it's calling is the vec new constructor. So now that we created a new empty vector, again, we can push values onto here. So let's call it test, and then let's push on string. Let's print it out just to make sure that we are working correctly. Clear it, build it, run it, and we have test string. So now what's really cool about vectors, they come with a ton of methods that we can already use. So I highly encourage you to explore all these methods after this lecture just to really familiarize yourself with everything available in the vector class. So what we're going to do, just for an example, is reverse the vector that we created. So by doing this, we should see when we print it out, string test, which is exactly what we got. We have string test. So again, I highly encourage you that after this lecture, just play around with all the different methods that a vector provides and just really get familiar with them, as they will help you in your Rust career. So another really cool thing that we can do is if you know the size that your vector is going to be, we can actually specify that. So let's start off with a new vect, and we'll call this one vect. And we're going to say vec. Now we have to give it a type since we are creating it empty in this case. So I'm going to give it integer 32 with capacity 2. And then I would just want to print out just to make sure that it created that capacity, vect dot capacity. There we go. So let's build it. Okay, we have an issue here. It says use fully qualified syntax. So we said let mute vect of type I32 with capacity 2. Let's see if we can use the compiler to figure this issue out. So I know that this one's not going to work, and it's because we needed greater than and less than around it. So now that we use the compiler to figure it out, let's go ahead and run it. So down here it says 2, which is what we set our capacity to be at. So you might be wondering, well, if I create a vector with capacity 2, what happens if I end up needing extra capacity? Luckily, the vector can grow if it needs to. And the way it works is it's going to allocate a larger buffer, copy the present contents into the new buffer, and then it's going to update our vector variable to point to the new buffer, and then it's going to free the old vector from memory. So basically it's just going to get a new region of memory, push everything into it, and then delete the old. So that way it's very seamless for us to be able to expand it as we need to. And then one other trick I want to show you is you can actually create a vector using an iterator. And we will talk about iterators later on in this course. So we'll say we want to create a vector from values 0 to 5, not including 5. And let's go ahead and print it out. And it should give us values 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4, which is exactly what we got down here. We have values 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So, again, I highly encourage you to play around with all the methods available to vectors to really familiarize yourself with them. It is a very essential type in Rust, and it will immensely help you as you continue to learn Rust. In the next lecture, we will talk about what slices are.